20 degrees centigrade here in Abuja, and humidity this time is about 47%, so pretty fair, but still chilly weather at the moment. So yes, indeed, you can go about your business as much as you can if you don't like the heat that will come up much later in the day. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise. It is this Monday morning. I'm Chamberlain Osok.
You know, looking at the sky, bright and early, it just speaks to a beautiful day out there, but it also depends on what you do with it.
Yep.
I'm Neil Tagbe. Welcome to Sunrise Daily.
And here in Lagos, it is a no less beautiful a scene you will see. This is the lagoon front of the Third Mainland Bridge, and of course, you just look at it. Just look at the beauty of it. It's just marvelous, isn't it? Well, you can tell what the day is going to look like by the way it starts, can't you? The weather right now, of course, as you can see, again, railroad and water. The beauty of Lagos, you can't take that away. Well, right now, humidity is 79%, wind traveling 5 kilometers an hour, and the weather is 24 degrees. Good morning. This is Lagos. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Yeah, so interesting scenario there. Sometimes, you know, you could just wonder that bridge stretches to different parts. You know, if you're not careful, you could confuse certain areas, Marina, Lagoon Front for UNILAG students. They know when you mention Lagoon Front. Oh yeah, so it comes to mind right there.
That's a former kite talking the Lagoon Front, but this kid's not the Lagoon Front, you know. Okay,
well, just thinking out loud, anyways. But yes, indeed. So quite a number of scenarios will play out today, but security has been a thing lately, and it still is, because today the Inspector General of Police, they're going to go ahead and begin training of this. They refer to them as the SIS, Special Intervention Squad and Tactical Operation. That's the IGP's team, because he had launched that, vowing that they were going to combat violent crimes and restore peace to promote economic growth and prosperity in Nigeria. So they will be going ahead to launch that today and begin the training for those chaps who are supposed to ensure that all goes well in the city.
Indeed, I do hope that they get to... Someone made a suggestion about reaching out to those who have somewhat left the institution to like step back and contribute their own quota. I mean, those who retired or for one reason or the other. You know, some left quite early. So let's see if they can reach out to them as well. Say, hey, come in. We need all the hands we can get. But besides that, which is happening for security, we'll go to the courts, and it's the Supreme Court this time. Adama, I think, is one of the last cases that has to do with the elections. Aisha Binani is going to court to ask the Supreme Court to determine her victory as against the victory of the serving governor, Marufin Tiri of Adama State. So that will be happening at the Supreme Court today.
Yeah, but you also get to notice that INEC will be conducting what they refer to as this verification of states and federal constituencies ahead of the by-election that will be coming up over time. So they're preparing for that across different states. So all eyes will be on them to ensure that the process they've kickstarted will engender confidence. They shed light and not heat on the entire matter. So who knows?
I think that verification also includes the political parties, the viability of the different political parties. So if all political party members, watch out. You might be hearing that some parties are no longer viable.
Oh, and then who knows if they'll go to court this time to challenge.
INEC has a bar.
I guess we'll see then. Ayo.
Well, most certainly. While we're talking about business, which is essentially the lifeblood of any economy, while we are talking about politics, I mean, business morning today, we're going to be looking at an issue that's been of concern to several, and that's the fact that, you know, the central bank governor, some say, haven't conducted an MPC meeting in a while and all, and there's been conversations about, look, you don't change a team in the middle of the game and all of that. All of that understanding you get on Business Morning this morning as Ini and her team will be talking about MPC's external committee, and more of that when it's 7 o'clock this, 10 o'clock this morning on Business News. Back to papers now, Chamberlain.
So let's go ahead and have a look. We'll start with Nigerian Tribune this morning, and ECOWAS shaky as Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso quit. So that is a big lead on the front page of Nigerian Tribune here today. Their withdrawal notification not yet received, body says. More divisions imminent, NIA directors warn. Then on the bottom strip here, you see how NAS has been violating constitution since 1999.
From the Tribune, we go on to The Guardian. That's a coup fallout. Trade security concerns as Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso exit ECOWAS. That's what they lead with as well. Continues on page 6. When you look at the picture there, the three leaders of those countries and our president. But I'm sure there's something that ECOWAS will really want to delve into and see how to keep the body together. But below that, accounts for over 40 trillion allocations to the FCT councils. SERAP tells governors, as in SERAP is calling out to the different governors in different states and the FCT to account for 40 trillion naira that was allocated to the local government areas. Then the other matter about petrol trading lifts NNPC's profits. But that's it from The Guardian.
Front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning is also talking about the ECOWAS story. Pressure tightens on Nigeria's foreign trade as Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso exit ECOWAS. What does that mean indeed? The details you'll find on page 3. Nigerians risk a further hike in price of rice, oil, millet, others. Okay. We'll get more understanding on that later, but that's the lead story of the Nigerian News Direct today.
Look at the Inquirer, Abuja Inquirer. Breakthrough. DPO rejects 1 million naira bribe. NABS, Nabiha's killer. Wike tasks area councils on vigilante teams. Amakche lists kidnappers hotspots. So that's what you see with the Inquirer.
The Daily Independent talks about the naira as against other currencies. Says experts see the naira trading at 2,000 naira to a dollar. Says the CBN overwhelmed. That's what Daily Independent's leading with. And then the other matter, legal hurdles may scuttle Lagos government planned airport. Those are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Independent.
Well, Lagos has always surmounted its troubles. Well, for this one, we'll wait and see. The Nigerian Observer leads with something different. Union staffers divided over sale of Shell's onshore assets. Staffers say more interested in continuity terms. What does all of that mean? You'll find the details on page 2 of the Nigerian Observer today.
Have a look at Business Day. NNPC cash for oil deal mortgages 30% of output. But they also have a bit on the ECOWAS scenario here. Africa's free trade area under threat as ECOWAS shrinks. Business Day reports.
And this Nigeria leads with that story, the ECOWAS story, but this they captured it a different way. Rumpus in ECOWAS as Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso quit sub-regional body, alleged foreign manipulation of organization following sanctions on coup. ECOWAS not aware of exit. That's how this Nigeria captioned it. And below that, you have that story that broke over the weekend. NDLEA declares ex-beauty queen Aderinoye wanted for drug trafficking. That's another lead story there on this Nigeria.
The Blueprint newspaper has this on its front page, totally different, looking more inwards, I dare say. We're confronting bandits taking fight to criminals' den. That's according to the federal government. And look at the riders. Perpetrators of plateau killings, others will be brought to book. Assures MDA is working to bring down inflation, stabilize economy. Relocation of CBN fan offices for operational efficiency, that's ascribed to the Minister of Information and National Orientation. Find the details, continue on the inside pages. That's the lead story of the Blueprint newspaper today.
Okay, so let's take a look at some of these issues that stick out. The scenario on the front page of Blueprint, music to the ears to a lot of people, because when you talk about security, you talk about agencies doing their bit and ensuring that things are done properly, and then the question of fight against corruption. So when you see this kind of stories that the DPO rejecting ₦1 million, way to go. It just sends very good signals across board that indeed you have these kinds of people in the force who can actually stand up and be counted. So this is the kind of narrative and reports that lots of Nigerians want to see, and then they want it spread across board. They want this kind of scenarios to be the norm, where security will stand up and do what they have to do. So yes, you've seen the FCT rally to ensure that different units, I think the minister has been visiting different area councils and trying to ensure that asked what's their need, what is the challenge, having boots on the ground, being hands-on in terms of what you do about security. So with this, we can only say very well done to the FCT Divisional Police Officer of Tafat Local Government area here, SP Idris Ibrahim. Very well done there. So persons like this should be encouraged to do a lot more. So we do hope that the police force will do whatever it takes to encourage this kind of attitude, this kind of scenario coming through, whatever they have to do either to him to make sure he continues preaching that message. And it'll be a message and a signal to criminals out there that, look, it's not business as usual. It's business unusual, because wherever you are, whatever you do, they should be able to get hold of it. So well done to the gentleman.
You know, Chamberlain, that matter, a lot of people look down on the police because they feel that there are a lot of bad elements there. But as I say, in every good bunch, there's always one fruit that may not be too good.
Yeah.
But the good always outnumbers the bad. So let's encourage the ones who are doing good like this.
And not that he has fantastic welfare remuneration.
It's the same welfare that every other person gets at his level.
And some people in his level give excuses to do other things.
No, they'll tell
he chose.
They'll tell you that they have obligations and all of that.
Like everybody does.
Like everybody does. So, but doing good, I keep saying that growing up, one of the things we used to hear, and it's still there, you hear a good name is better than all the riches in the world, because we have all the money, but your name cannot match your riches. And
so we now, as a society, we need to ensure that we rally around persons like this in different sectors.
Indeed.
Wherever it is, because it's usually a lonely road if you want to stand out and do the right things. It's very lonely out there. So for this kind of people, we should find ways to encourage them, because they are all over the place.
True.
But they need the pat on the back.
True. So we're patting you on the back, SP. But let's go on to the Nigerian Observer here and look at that story. Union staffers divided over sale of Shell's onshore assets. That's what they're leading with. But if you look up above the nameplate, compliance as test pensions assets hit 18.4. We'll talk about the pension scheme in Nigeria. That's one area a lot of people have talked about. I had a conversation with the Minister of Housing who was talking about funding for the housing sector. And they are considering even looking into the pensions and see how that can be used, so that people who are doing contributions, your contributions can actually go to fund your house. Because the matter of housing is a major one. The housing deficit in Nigeria, there's that conversation, whether it's 17 million or 21 million, it's there. And
they don't have the actual figure.
It's, again, data is another matter altogether. So this matter of visiting the Pensions Act is something that really should be considered, and how quickly it can be worked on.
One of the ways for the minister to test is, when you ask people, do they know about any scheme whatsoever? I think that would be your result, to tell you whether or not people know what you're doing. If not, you know the results.
Indeed. Aya?
Well, two stories stand out for me on the front pages this morning, but I'll stick with the one on the front page of this Nigeria newspaper. It's something that you also cited the other time, Nyota, when you read it. By the way, I need to add my voice to what you guys spoke about concerning that policeman who did what he ought to do, as he ought to do it. And these are the kind of people that should be getting awards, aren't they? I understand that in the UK, it's the basic people, so to speak, that get national honors. Ordinary people, ordinary citizens get the national honors. So can we have an award segment in the national honors, officer, OFR, MFR, whatever it is, for people who do amazing things in the country to encourage them? Can we add that to the list? This policeman and a few others who have done similar things. Some time back, we saw the story of, I think it's a street sweeper who found something and reported it. These people, we shouldn't just pat them on the back and let them go. Can we give them national honors as well, as being the examples that we want as part of the national values the Minister of Information and National Orientation is preaching? Back to my highlight, guys, is that story where the SERAP is asking the governors to account for 40 trillion naira local government area allocations, as well as the FCT. That story, of course, is on page 7. We've been talking about this thing for eons. And 40 trillion naira across all local governments in all states and the FCT. And if we're asking the questions, if SERAP, for instance, is asking the state governors to account for them, it sounds like, looks like, feels like we do not see the effect on the real lives of the people in the various parts of the country, the 774 local governments and the ancillary local council development areas all across the nation. So, what are the governors going to say? Are we even going to get any response from them at all? Chamberlain, Nyota?
Well, I guess we will see, but we'll watch and see. But also, guys, let's not skip this. On the front page of The Guardian here, there's a warning right there. It says, beware, COVID infections, fatalities still on the prowl. Look, many have forgotten all about that experience. Many think, look, it's gone with the wind.
Yeah.
But a quick reminder here, bringing us back to earth, how we conduct ourselves now. Because in some of the claims, they're coming up with several other vaccines to make sure these things are gone. But with this, we need to equally pay attention here. So let's be cautious and not think that... but incidentally, lots of people have thrown caution to the wind. They think it's over and done with.
Nobody's paying attention anymore. We're not washing hands anymore. The precautionary measures that were put out there, a lot of people don't even observe them anymore. Indeed, what people have seen in one or two offices, they actually have the sanitizers on their table as a decoration, no longer being used as much as or washing the hands as we ought to. Health is wealth. Go to the bathroom, wash your hands. Come back into your house, wash your hands. I mean, with COVID, as you're coming to the house, you're taking off your clothes at the corner there, leave the clothes there for the laundry. Come on, let's get back to being healthy.
No, but can they blame the media for this time, for not going up with this lifestyle? It has to be a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. I mean, it's a norm, a lifestyle, and it can be done. So please, understand that COVID infections, COVID is still on the prowl.
And we know we have a challenge with primary health care, let alone this. But we do hope that everybody pull together. And just so you know, those symptoms, if you see them, I think they normally refer to them as though they were malaria. Yeah. But we need to be a lot more cautious now. So there goes a look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in just a moment. We'll focus on ECOWAS. What is the implication of what those countries have done? How does it affect us? How does it affect you and I? We'll attempt to find out from our guest in just a moment. Stay on with us.
Tinubu has encouraged members of the Economic Community of West African States to remain committed to ensuring that democracy remains the only form of governance in the sub-region. Speaking in his capacity as chairman during the opening ceremony of the 64th Ordinary Session of the ECOWAS Authorities of Heads of States and Government, which is taking place in the State House, Abuja, President asked the leaders to fight for democracy and stand against unconstitutional change of government among member states. He, however, emphasized the need to re-engage with countries under military rule to guarantee realistic and short transition plans that can deliver democracy and good governance. President Tinubu also implored West African leaders to prioritize good governance and collective prosperity as an essential tool to prevent authoritarian takeovers of power and unconstitutional changes of government in the region.
Security in the region is the focal point, and we must achieve this regardless of other commitments. I would like to reiterate the imperative of the regions to continue to re-engage under the military rule and basis of realistic and short transition plan that can deliver democracy and good governance. No alternative. I wish to underscore the fact that we stand against unconstitutional change of government in our sub-region, and we will continue to do so. I therefore urge all of us to stand strong and highly committed in the face of any challenge in Sierra Leone and Guinea-Bissau. The message must go down clearly that we will support a democratically elected government, not unconstitutional exercise without let of hindrance. Democracy must win if we fight for it. And we will definitely fight for democracy.
Okay, so Professor Ademola Abbas joins us this morning. He's of international law and also global affairs expert. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well,
nice to see you again.
Yeah, so the ECOWAS themselves issued a statement following that development, that broadcast from those countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, pulling out of ECOWAS, saying that they have not been formally notified. They've not even been notified in any way whatsoever. So, meaning that people, whatever reaction that people expect from them will not come because they have not been notified. So first, we're not sure if that notification is going to happen. So from your perspective, whether that comes or not, one expects that, of course, they're supposed to act and know the implications of all of this action. So how did this come across to you when you heard it?
Well, thank you very much, Chamberlain. And good morning to you, to all your colleagues there. Well, it is true that ECOWAS has not been officially notified by those three countries of their withdrawal. And that leaves one probability that they've only signified their intention to withdraw. They haven't withdrawn, so to say, because withdrawal is not something you do in ECOWAS or any other organization for that matter via the media. Article 91 of the ECOWAS Treaty makes this very, very clear. The process a member state must follow when it wants to withdraw from the community, that is from the ECOWAS community. And so so ECOWAS has not at all withdrawn from ECOWAS has not.
Yeah, but Prof, there was that, if they had a broadcast, to their citizens, what else is ECOWAS waiting for? That is clearly whatever notice they were looking for.
Chamberlain, is just let's use an analogy here. INEC in Nigeria conducts an election. Anybody can make an announcement of who has won. A party itself who contests can announce that it's winning. In any country, they do that. until the official umpire announces in accordance with the electoral law, the winner of the elections, whatever other announcements come to play would not be acceptable. What I'm saying is that there is a legal procedure for members of ECOWAS to join the association or the community, and also when they want to leave, there is a legal procedure to leave. That is why I quoted Article 91, specifically paragraph 1 of the revised ECOWAS Treaty of 1993 signed in Cotonou. Now, but be that as it may, you raise a very vital point, and that is the fact that these three countries anyway, they've made an announcement. They've informed the world of their intention to withdraw from ECOWAS. So that shows clearly they want to leave ECOWAS. Of course, they have not done so constitutionally. However, that gives ECOWAS an immediate information that they need to start acting now. And I'm not surprised that just yesterday, on the 28th of this month, ECOWAS adopted a communique in which it says two things. That on the one hand, their attention has been drawn to the the announcement made by these three states that they are yet to receive a formal notification. However, they also said in that communique, if you read it, that ECOWAS will work hard to make sure they resolve the crisis with the three member states. That is very, very important when they say they are going to be able to engage those three member states. So ECOWAS is not sitting on its hand to say, well, you have not initiated the formal process of withdrawing, which is what the ECOWAS protocol, funding treaties specifies. But we know you intend to, and we're not going to wait, and we're going to act proactively. I think ECOWAS deserves a condemnation.
So that Article 91,
yes,
which is on withdrawal, yes, it clearly states it that, reading from there, it says, quote, any member state wishing to withdraw from the community shall give to the executive secretary 1 year's notice in writing, who shall inform member states thereof. At the expiration of this period, if such notice is not withdrawn, such a state shall cease to be a member of the community. And then Article 92 talks about transitional and savings provisions. But, Prof, do you think this Article 91 took into cognizance this kind of scenario now, where military government is in place, and of course it does appear as though they want to perpetuate themselves in power, not having any ECOWAS breathing down their necks, and so announcing this pullout is to give them that breather to just stay there for as long as they want to?
Shimbalin, I was going to call you ECOWAS there. Well, you can't be ECOWAS. It's a very important question you asked, but the short shrift answer is that yes, ECOWAS protocol, the founding treaty, beg your pardon, 1975, revised in 1993, just read Article 91, still contemplates this scenario. That article is addressed to ECOWAS member states, not ECOWAS government. It doesn't matter whether a government is a civilian government or a military government. So far, you are still a member of ECOWAS. Mind you, even if you are suspended from ECOWAS, as those three states have been suspended, they are still ECOWAS members. Only they are suspended as far as certain obligations of ECOWAS are concerned, basically. So you cannot say, because now we are a military regime, we are suspended, we cannot win. And that is why what you just read, if you go to Article 91, paragraph 2, it says until that time, until expiration of that 1 year notice, you are still bound to carry out the obligations you have assumed under ECOWAS treaty. So that answers your question. In other words, Article 91.1 says, give a notice, which is for 1 year, but during that time, except anything happens, you must still comply. That is under Article 91.2 with your obligation. So it doesn't matter whether you're a civilian regime or you are a military regime. So far you are still an ECOWAS member state, you are bound by that treaty, pure and simple.
Prof, if I may come in here, the matter that the three countries mentioned, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the issues that they raise as backing or the factors militating they are wishing to withdraw, even though you spoke about 1 year, but they are saying it's with immediate effect. So you weigh in on that as well. But let's look at the issues they mentioned. Are they not matters that the ECOWAS needs to look at critically?
That's a brilliant question, to be honest with you. And I'll come to that in a minute. But let me first of all address what you just said, that in the question of whether you said the suspension of their withdrawal is immediate effect. Look, they can say anything. If the process says it has to last for 1 year, you cannot truncate that, because otherwise you'll still be violating your own obligation that you freely assume under ECOWAS treaty anyway. So, it's going to create a chaotic order to the constitutional arrangement of ECOWAS state or any other organization for that matter to be able to do that. So they are still bound by that one a year. We'll come back to the question whether that is enforceable by ECOWAS or not. That's a different thing. But the second leg of your question, though, is whether ECOWAS should be looking at the issue raised by these states. It's a very fundamental question. Because if you go back to what they said that in their joint communique, that's for the three states, they said ECOWAS has drifted from the ideals of its founding fathers and the spirit of Pan-Africanism. You ask yourself the question, what are those ideals that these states say ECOWAS has drifted from? If you look at, as an example, if you go back to ECOWAS founding this thing, Article 3 lists all those ideas in terms of aims and objectives of the community. It talks about economic integration, raising the standard of living of West Africans, creating an economic union of West Africa, and also contributing to the progress and development of Africa. Now, these are the four core ideals of ECOWAS, where ECOWAS was formed. If you go back to Article 4 of that same treaty, it talks about the fundamental principles of ECOWAS. I don't want to go into all those, but they're about the same thing. And you've got ECOWAS adopted different protocols. Later in the year, in 1981, the Protocol of Mutual Assurance and Defense, PMA, we call it. In 2001, it has adopted a panoply of protocols to articulate its ideals and everything. Now, if you pay attention to these ideals, it behoves on ECOWAS as an organization to make sure that the democratic tenets it wants to see in its member state are actually enforced through ECOWAS developing certain mechanisms to help those member states. As an example, you have a democratic government. Yes, ECOWAS wants democracy. And I've listened to the chairman of ECOWAS when he was talking, that's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of Nigeria. He said, we will fight for democracy. And he said, ECOWAS will survive when democracy thrives, and we are going to fight for democracy. Right. But is democracy only when the government is elected into power? No. Do you say democracy stops simply because at the point when ECOWAS member states appoint democratic governments? At all. Elections are just the key to open the door to democracy. Elections are not democracy. They are just a key to open the door. Democracy condiments include good governance, rule of law, probity, transparency, lack of corruption, and so many things. All these vices are permanently featured in most, at least 95 or 90% of ECOWAS member states. The big question for the world, for us, for ECOWAS is, what has ECOWAS been doing since 1975 to make sure that all these vices, which it was set up in 1975 to fight in its own member states, are actually fought? The answer is all up in the air. On the one hand, ECOWAS is developing a very strong legal regime, and you give it credit for that, to ensure the enthronement of democracy and the rule of law in its member states. But on the other hand, it's not developing cultures and tenets that will establish all those fundamentals to be present for the ultimate benefit of their people. So there's a dissociation, there's a disconjunction of what ECOWAS is doing. So on the one hand, you want democracy to thrive, you want democratic elections to be held, representative government, we understand that. But on the other hand, you are doing nothing. ECOWAS does not penalize any member state that is herring. ECOWAS does not, deal with any member state that botches its elections. ECOWAS does not punish any member state that is corrupt. ECOWAS does nothing to a member state that is violating the human rights of its people, and so on and so forth. But these are the ideas of these are the ideas for which ECOWAS was established in 1975. And these are the ideals that those three states are talking about.
Okay, Professor Abbas, sorry to interrupt you here. Yes, ECOWAS has these tenets and ideals that were put out there for the formation of the body. But one of the key areas I thought to bring up here is what the countries or the leaders are even talking about, that they have not been supported. They're not talking about the fact that they've been sanctioned. Yes, it's also mentioned later on, the sanctions against their countries for the coups that happened. But the first one they mentioned was support in the fight against terrorism and insecurity.
Look, that is a chicken and egg situation question. Okay. You have military juntas who have taken over governments in their countries, who have been suspended. Now they are saying ECOWAS has not supported them. Supported them at what point? Before they took over the government, or ECOWAS has not supported its democratic government in those countries. If the latter is the question, if their charge is that ECOWAS has not been supporting those countries when they were fighting terrorism and this and that, during democratic governments, we can begin to question that. We can begin to ask whether ECOWAS is indeed guilty of that. Again, that is a question of resources, though. That is, if ECOWAS has not been supporting its member states, democratic member states, when they were fighting terrorism and so on and so forth, as an example, as it should be doing, that is a question of resource of ECOWAS. It's not something that one member state can say, because you've not been supporting us, so we are leaving you. No. ECOWAS supporting member states to fight their own war internally is not one of the ideas of ECOWAS, even though it's one of the things that ECOWAS should be doing. What I'm saying is that is a bit far-fetched. On the other hand, if the hunters are saying that ECOWAS is not supporting them, that is the military regime that they are fighting this and that, ECOWAS cannot be suspending you as the undemocratic government and at the same time pouring support into you. It doesn't make any sense. It's contradictory. So what I'm saying is that we have to unpack that, and that's why I've not really wasted time on that kind of charge, because I think that is just a kind of justification fishing, is the way I see it. They are in power, they are undemocratic government, whether we like it or not, and they must find the reason. They are in town. They are shopping for reasons. They are shopping for justifications to annihilate ECOWAS or to remove themselves from ECOWAS. But hey, here's the good news for them. They don't need to bring up, spurious reasons or ludicrous reasons at all. It is enough for them, as they have said in their communique, that ECOWAS has drifted from the ideals for which its founding fathers established it. That is enough. You don't have to go on forum shopping, on some justification shopping that is going to come back to haunt you. So therefore, Ghana can stand up tomorrow, or Togo can stand up tomorrow and say, because ECOWAS is not supporting our anti-money laundering activity, we are leaving ECOWAS. No, that cannot
one of the issues that one might also want to consider in this space, Prof, is the reaction or the take of the people in the various states, in the Burkina Faso, in Mali, and in Niger. How the people are taking, the current situation in their country is something of significance, isn't it? Because up until now, I don't know if there is any hush-hush from any of these countries that they do not like the leadership that they have now. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, is the claim they have also that ECOWAS has not done anything to even help the individual states to manage their democracies in a way that will be beneficial to the people. What argument then will ECOWAS would you suggest that ECOWAS be putting forward to help the different countries, the member states, to fully get on the plate and say, okay, now we can have a conversation in a way that will benefit the people of the different countries?
Well, Ayo, thank you very much. I did have a bit of problem with part of your audio, but I think I could make general thing you are trying to say. That on the one hand, you are talking about people's reactions in their various countries to this development. And again, what can ECOWAS do in terms of helping its member state in terms of their democratic cultures and stuff like that? These things are not far-fetched. Number one is the issue of how people react. You remember in Nigeria here, we had a bout of military coups and coups. Whenever military struck in those days, we would pour out on the street and we would celebrate. We would jubilate. I wasn't around during the first military regime, 1966, January 15, and the counter coup of July 29, 1966. But I was around, obviously, even if I was a little boy, when Murtala coup took place, and then subsequent coups, Bachaku and this and that, Babangida and so on. And at a point in time, I was in the university. Instinctively, we would jubilate. We would pour on the street. You would celebrate. You would welcome them. Because before we got to know better, the military would take over and say they were coming because of the excesses of the civilians and this and that. Civilians are corrupt. The civilians, the bloody civilians, as they call us, and this and that and so on. We would jubilate. And that is to be expected because people get constantly frustrated by the recklessness of the political class. We have an example in Nigeria here. We don't have to go too far. It's across the continent, in which political class becomes extremely reckless, extremely corrupt sometimes, completely insensitive to their people. And when you have that, people get tired, and they are not looking forward to another 4 years down the road, because we got to a point in Nigeria, right from President Shagari's regime in 1979, that it became a route where we were no longer looking forward to it, but we knew at the end of the day, 4 years will come again, we'll go with the same thing. So whenever military struck in the past, we were jubilant. So that is the first reaction of the people. But when the dust begins to settle, and you then begin to see that the military regimes are even in some situations worse off than their civilian counterparts, then you begin to ask yourself questions. But the danger then is that you can't ask loud questions because military regimes are brutally repressive anyway. You still remember the Abacha guns in those days. I mean, today, whether we like it or not, we can go to the parliament and debate. House of Reps, the Senate, and this and that, state assemblies. We can debate and we can hear, we can fight, we can quarrel. It's part of the land of democracy. We don't argue with the guns. We don't argue with the military. So people's reactions, and for instance, in those countries, as an example, when the coup took place, first and foremost, were very jubilant. But I'm sure as things are beginning to come down, as a different thing entirely. Then secondly is that the people in the Sahel, especially in the Francophone part of Sahel, also has a particular, the people have a particular history with the French dominance of those particular. So their jubilation is not only in terms of their frustration with their own political elites at home, but also with the fact that they saw that point, as a tipping point in their relationship with the Western countries, especially France, that has been so dominant in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. So you have to look at it from that point of view. But if we move a bit beyond that, we begin to come back to the part of your question. ECOWAS is still stuck in 1975. Basically, ECOWAS is trying to be a supranational organization which wants to exercise certain powers beyond its member states, but without developing the tenets to be able to do that. What do I mean? Look at the European Union today. If the European Union will suspend a member state, that member state is in trouble because you know what you are going to lose by leaving the European Union. Let me ask you a question. If ECOWAS suspend a member state, what is that member state going to lose? Can ECOWAS suspend Nigeria or Ghana? The answer to my mind is absolutely no, because you're killing the ECOWAS economy. In other words, member states don't actually see the benefit of being in ECOWAS. Don't forget, in the year 2000, Mauritania was the first country to leave ECOWAS. Didn't come back until 2017 when they signed an associate agreement with ECOWAS. Mauritania doesn't see what it's losing. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger wouldn't see what they would lose per se by not being members of ECOWAS. And that is a very important thing. What I'm saying here is that ECOWAS needs to go to the drawing board and begin to, the same thing anyway affects African Union. You begin to develop in a way that you have things that your member state will look forward to by being their member, by joining you. So when they leave you, they know what they are going to lose. ECOWAS has not done that, and it's not doing it.
Well, but Prof, another consideration that a number of people might also be putting in mind is the future of these three countries, particularly because, as you said, they are in the Sahel and all of that, is the fact that these are landlocked nations. They are insulated, so to speak, within the continent by other countries. So how do you see, in the event that this trajectory continues, like they say, okay, you know what, we're going to continue to do what we're doing, we are going to leave, they eventually make it formal. I'm just trying to, hypothesize. In the event that that happens, what are the implications both for those countries and for a country like Nigeria? Because some paper on the front page of a paper in this this morning is already saying that, look, Nigeria, it might be having more costly, spending more money on some things just in case. Can you hear me, Prof?
I couldn't hear 95% of what you said. Your audio was pretty bad from that end.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll have to throw it. Can you hear me? I can hear you, but can you hear me now?
Better now. Now, if you can just repeat the question, it's better. Okay.
These three countries are landlocked in Africa. So they literally have to depend on other African countries, so to speak, to get in and out of in some way or the other. So what are the implications of that economically, both on those three countries and a country like Nigeria?
Well, thank you, Ayo. I thought I picked that then. Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Two things might happen here. They're landlocked and of course, they're facing down ECOWAS. And I did say earlier when I was talking that by those states also not serving a formal notice to ECOWAS, they might just also trying to prod ECOWAS because they know the consequence that would be if they were to leave ECOWAS, at least economically. They might have just gone ahead to make that announcement formally that we intend to leave ECOWAS as a way of sort of baiting ECOWAS to come back and re-engage with them, which by the way would be a very smart move. And I think ECOWAS is already catching that bait by saying, you know what, we haven't got a formal notice from you, but we are going to work to use ECOWAS' particular sentence. He said, we are going to seek the restoration of order in those 3 states. So that might be the reason why those states are doing that, because they know the consequences of them leaving ECOWAS. That's on the one hand. Now, on the other hand, that if they were to carry it to the end, as you've asked, then it's going to be devastating to them economically, so as far as this integration in West Africa is concerned. And it's going to push them. Don't forget, they also have certain problems with France already. They've thrown out France from their country. France is waiting. France is going to also play back, so they are likely to run back to France at the end of the day. If that doesn't happen, start thinking about them running to Russia or running to China, as a kind of an interim measure. But for Nigeria, the problem is not going to be, the consequence is not going to be so much economic for Nigeria as much as military. Because there's a lot of collaboration as far as fighting terrorism between Nigeria and Niger, especially. And they are like a leopard that say, Yoruba will say, if a leopard cannot squeeze, your milk, it can knock it off. At the end of the day, they can begin to play a bad boy game. If you want us in ECOWAS, we will make sure we don't cooperate with you in your fight against terrorism. Who say they cannot even sponsor, militia against some countries in West Africa, including Nigeria, because these are military. Okay, Prof. These are terrorism hotbeds.
Yeah. Pardon me to jump in. We do have Mr. Bayo Oloake also joining us this morning. He's an international affairs analyst. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Now, this decision, by ECOWAS, we've seen the response from ECOWAS over these countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso's purported decision, because they say they've not been communicated. We've also seen the grounds, Article 91 and 92, grounds upon which they can notify the Commission for their withdrawal. But we also have some school of thought that thinks the grounds for that notification or that withdrawal, number one, is faulty because it's an illegal military regime that ECOWAS doesn't recognize. And so since they have this zero tolerance to this kind of scenario, illegal government, so they cannot be the government to write to ECOWAS saying they are withdrawing. And as such, it's almost putting something on nothing. What is your reading of the situation?
That's a very interesting position, actually. But I think it's not as straightforward as it sounds. Definitely, there will be protocols for vacating your treaty obligation as a member state of an organization. And I quite agree that from the time the announcement was made and now, I doubt if those treaty obligations have been complied with. Now, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that these countries remain members of the African Union. They remain members of the United Nations. And so we saw, for example, their leadership addressing the General Assembly of the UN in September last year. So if ECOWAS says that these governments are not recognized and therefore they cannot take decisions, the truth is that they have been carrying out obligations with other states. But yes, if ECOWAS does say they have not complied with treaty obligations for vacating their membership, I agree completely. ECOWAS has a very strong point on that score. So it will be interesting for us just to see, what happens. But if you permit me, I just want to quickly chip in into a point being made earlier on by my panelists here, which I think is a point we shouldn't lose sight of. There are serious consequences for these countries if they leave ECOWAS. I agree that maybe some dominant hegemons like Nigeria or Cote d'Ivoire or Senegal, it might be difficult for ECOWAS to enforce this kind of sanctions on them. But the truth is that for Burkina Faso, for Mali, and Guinea, although Guinea hasn't pulled out, last year, 2023, there were 2 million Burkinabes, Malians, and Guineans who went to Cote d'Ivoire to work, taking advantage of the ECOWAS protocol. And in Cote d'Ivoire, as we speak, there are not less than 3 million migrant workers from ECOWAS countries, principally from Burkina Faso, and then to some degree from Mali and Guinea, who are working in the plantations. Now, with this decision that these countries are taking, what becomes the status of these workers in Cote d'Ivoire? And what becomes the situation for those who may still wish to go to Cote d'Ivoire from Burkina Faso and Mali to work in the plantations? This is just one example because of time, but there are serious and grave consequences for the decisions that they have taken, definitely.
Well, interesting scenario too, but if you look at that from an economic standpoint, there are those who wonder, so will ECOWAS allow citizens who, some of them may not even like what happened, bear the brunt on the one hand, and then secondly, the economy, data from International Trade Center talks about, it highlights the value of import and export from these countries to, say, for instance, Nigeria. If you look at that on Niger Republic, it rose to $33.4 million in 2022 from $25.7 million in 2021. But that of Mali declined to $166,000 from $180,000. And that of Burkina Faso increased to $40,000 from $6,000. Yes, we know it's landlocked. They lose the treaty, different protocols to travel free for an ECOWAS basis. So who loses more? Will it be those countries or ECOWAS at large?
No, definitely those countries are losing more. ECOWAS will lose some as well, but I think those countries are going to lose more. Burkina Faso and Mali will depend on the ports in Guinea for imports and exports. Guinea is still a member of ECOWAS, and Guinea has not pulled out. So I assume that ECOWAS will be intensifying diplomacy to ensure that Guinea does not join the bandwagon. In the case of Niger, she has to depend on ports in Nigeria and Benin Republic. She's denied access to those ports because of the ECOWAS sanctions. The only alternative for Niger is to use ports in Algeria. That is extremely far away from Niamey. So it's really, really going to have significant effect. And this leads me to agreeing again with my colleague on this panel that perhaps these countries are grandstanding and wish to negotiate from a position of strength, by making this announcement, because the consequences for them are great. They are not Senegal, they are not Cote d'Ivoire, they are not Nigeria, they are not Ghana, that can maybe afford to even if it does happen, that may escape such severe sanctions. And don't forget that usually right from the conflict in Liberia in the 1990s, there has been a tradition by which whatever decision ECOWAS takes is automatically endorsed by the African Union and by the United Nations. So we are likely to see that whatever ECOWAS decides, ECOWAS will want to bring the African Union and the United Nations on board, because I'm sure they would like to discourage other states from acting in this way. So let's see what happens with regard to the economic consequences of the decisions they've taken.
Ayo.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. One of the issues that strikes me and interests me is what you have just talked about, whether or not these nations are grandstanding. But the question then I would also want to ask is, how helpful has Nigeria's leadership as the head of ECOWAS at this time and foreign policy position helped so far in this matter? And what do you think we should be looking at?
I also didn't hear you too clearly. You're asking what the policy decisions of ECOWAS, or what we should expect from ECOWAS?
No. Can you hear me better now?
Slightly better, yeah.
Okay.
Can you repeat?
Oh, yes, I can. What is your position? Because you just mentioned the fact that these nations may be grandstanding and all, but the question that I want to ask you is, how helpful has Nigeria's position been, first as head of ECOWAS at this time, and secondly, Nigeria's own foreign policy position at this time? How helpful has it? Oh dear. Well, let me take this back to Chamberlain. Chamberlain, it's back to you.
Okay, well, we're just going to be winding down at this point in time. So Gentlemen, give us your impression of what you think should be happening now. Either how should ECOWAS be responding to this now? Mr. Olowake.
I think, first of all, that one of the lessons for ECOWAS in this debacle is the necessity to diversify its sources of funding. ECOWAS activities and programs are largely funded by the European Union. And this opened ECOWAS to allegations by these military regimes of being an instrument, for example, of French imperialism or an instrument of European Union imperialism. And this is largely because they fund ECOWAS activities. And I feel that ECOWAS must diversify its sources of funding and not depend on any major power, so that should the policy of ECOWAS gain convergence with that foreign power, ECOWAS will not be accused of being an instrument. Secondly, I think ECOWAS must think of how to support the insurgency, the fight against the insurgency in Mali and Burkina Faso. I had proposed at some point that ECOWAS should consider sending a brigade-sized force to both Ouagadougou and to Bamako to stabilize those capitals and to release Burkinabe and Malian soldiers guarding the capital to go and join their colleagues who are fighting against insurgency. I think this will show the citizens of these countries that ECOWAS is not entirely against them and ECOWAS is concerned. I still repeat that call, and I think ECOWAS should still keep the doors open. Thank you.
So, Prof, what about you? What do you think? What should ECOWAS be doing now?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. As I said earlier on, ECOWAS needs to be more inward-looking. It needs to begin to look to hold most of its member states, or all its member states, accountable in the way they implement their democratic values. Because at the end of the day, that has opened ECOWAS to double standard. That when your democratic members are misbehaving, when they are looting, when they are corrupt, when they are this, when they are repressive, ECOWAS does nothing, looks the other way. Then when popular revolt from the military now take place in those countries, ECOWAS is quick to move, as we saw when these coups happened just about a year ago. So in Niger and in Burkina Faso, ECOWAS needs to start doing more towards its member state. However, in terms of ECOWAS supporting insurgency, I agree with that. However, the caveat though is that ECOWAS has got to be very, very careful, and I said that earlier on. That is because ECOWAS as a regional organization cannot also interfere in internal affairs of its member state, except if it is clear-cut. Otherwise, if you have one segment of a country, as an example, rising upon against government of that country, let's say maybe through self-determination crisis and this and that, ECOWAS has got to be careful not to be seen again as being partisan, as being supportive of one arm, against another. That is a very, very slippery slope. And secondly is the fact that, and I agree with that entirely, look, Chapter 8 of the UN Charter spells out the relationship between regional organizations and United Nations. This is the time for greater harmony and implementation of that chapter. The same thing with African Union. Where is African Union in all this? What is the extent of the coordination between ECOWAS and African Union? I don't want to go back to Sierra Leone in the past and Liberia and the differences between African Union, the way OAU and African Union wanted to react, and ECOMAG wanted to react under ECOWAS in those days. So there's a need for better coherence between the sub-regional organizations in Africa and the continental organization called African Union. Although the problem is, on the final note, the problem is most of these things we are accusing ECOWAS to today that have opened ECOWAS to double standard query from its member state, they are also present in African Union. The question then is, how do you see the speck in my eyes if you have blood in your eyes? So ECOWAS and African Union have to clear their own eyes first before they can see clearer. I'm not saying it is not present in the Security Council of the United Nations. It's also in the United Nations. The earlier we begin to deal with this at sub-regional level, I think the better for us in West Africa.
All right, and Demola Bass, Professor of International Law and Global Affairs Analyst, as well as a Bayo Olowake, International Affairs Analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here today.
Thank you.
Okay, so business, the implication of that on ECOWAS is not lost on ECOWAS, I guess, but business scenario not also lost on us here. How are we faring? What is the CBN doing? Well, that's coming up next on Business with Ini John McQuarrie.
All right, Charbel, it's actually business with Laddie Williams today. We had it last week, but good morning, good evening, wherever the world you might be watching from. It's time to get the stories that set your agenda. It's another trading day right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Let's get off with the stories now. Let's take a look at some markets here. We see Chicago soybean futures inch higher today, but remained close to a multi-year low after rains in key suppliers, Brazil and Argentina, suggested that supply will remain plentiful. Corn and wheat prices fell with both markets, being well supplied. The most active soybean contract on the Chicago Board of Trade, SV1, up about 0.1%. If you look at the price there, 0.4% for soybeans at $12.45 in the gray market. For CBOT corn CV1, that's down about 0.2% at $4.45 for half a bushel. So we're seeing shipping analysts say more ships carrying grain were diverted from Suez Canal to routes around the Cape of Good Hope this week after attacks on vessels in the Red Sea. About 7 million metric tons of grain cargoes, normally transit the Suez Canal into the Red Sea, each month. So we're seeing all of that weighing on prices right there in the grains market. Let's get a quick check on the oil market. Now, oil prices climbed today after a drone attack on U.S. forces in Jordan added to worries over supply disruption in the Middle East as Houthi rebels stepped up their attacks on vessels in the Red Sea, hitting a Trafigura-operated fuel tanker there. So we see definitely, when it comes to the oil market, is it a supply disruption or demand concerns that move these prices? $83.84 a barrel, that's what we're having for crude this morning. It's up 0.4%. And we see U.S. WTI crude, $78.35 a barrel. So we're seeing both up. They had a good week, last week, but risk of a widening conflict in the Middle East come at the same time that Russian refined product exports are set to fall, with refineries and a major oil terminal under repair following, drone attacks by Ukraine. So we see the same dynamic there with the oil market and, the grain market. So that's how these markets are looking. We'll keep tracking to see how the market play out this week. To other stories now, just like Lagos State, we see Abia State, this time they have decided, that's the Ministry of Environment, to ban the use of styrofoam foils, popularly known as takeaway packs at this point. So the ministry, in a statement signed by the Commissioner for Environment, Philemon Ogbonna, said the use of the product as food containers has been banned, in the state. This time. He noted that takeaway had earlier been banned in some states, including Lagos. Therefore, advised the public to immediately discontinue the use of foils until investigations are fully carried out. We know Lagos State are given some kind of grace period, about 3 weeks, but we're still definitely tracking that. And we see the European Commission and the African Development Bank Group have formalized a new financial framework, partnership agreement to boost investment in infrastructure projects in Africa. The pact was signed on the sidelines of Italy-Africa Summit. The European Union's contribution to co-finance corporations with African Development Bank has significantly increased over the last 2 years, now amounting to about 972 million euros in blending operations and guarantees. So definitely they're looking at infrastructure development this time in Africa. Well, to transport news now, we see the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, has announced that the presidential initiative to deploy compressed natural gas mass transit buses is anticipated to lead to a reduction of over 50% in transport costs. Definitely, we need as much reduction in transport costs at this time because inflation is so high. The minister says he has urged Nigerians to see the initiative as a relief introduced by Tinubu's administration to alleviate the economic challenges stemming from subsidy removal. He also noted there's a concerted effort among the relevant ministries and agencies of the federal government to tackle inflation, stabilize foreign exchange rates, and establish a generally supportive climate for business and investment. Definitely, that's also going to shape the conversation later on Business Morning here. It's all about inflation. We're still expecting, the MPC meeting, the first one for 2024, right here in February. So we're expecting that. We're definitely going to track it, when that day comes. So we're going to be having, that's our next conversation in a few moments. Just stay with us. All right, so definitely our first conversation now, still about the MPC. At this time, right now is all eyes, on the Central Bank of Nigeria for the first meeting in February, and definitely it's all about inflation. It's all about currency, the FX market at this time, the Naira, being pressured. And we know that the MPC External Committee, at this point, that made the news over the weekend and about last week, and they're talking about that external committee. If you look at the composition right there, the MPC committee composition, we have the CBN governor. These are the people that make the decision when it comes to rates. Either they're going to hold rates, hike rates, other parameters there. Then we also have 4 deputies part of that committee. We have 2 bank directors, 5 external members. This is the one that's having issues at this point. We see that we did hear that they've not been paid, from the last meeting of 2023. So, and they've not even been carried along at this time. So we're going to be discussing the implications of that. Then MPC needs 6 of the 12 to be present to constitute a quorum at this time. All right, let's bring in Dr. Chamberlain Peterside. He's the chairman, Excellon Capital Advisors, joining us via Zoom. Great to have you on the show. Hello, Dr. Chamberlain. Dr. Chamberlain, can you hear me? All right, we'll try and get Dr. Chamberlain back, but definitely this is the issue right now, replacing these external members. How's it gonna, move the decision, when it comes to, getting either we get the rate hikes or the hold or a rate cut, but definitely a rate cut is out of the books at this point, looking at the level of inflation, in the country. But in global markets, definitely there's been a lot of chatter about rate cuts. When you look at the US Fed and other developed economies, we're seeing that inflation is coming down. And it's not at their targets yet, it's nearing their targets, but at the same time, inflation is still not where they want it to be. So there's talk about maybe hold, then maybe at some point in 2024, we might have cuts, for major global economies. But right here, we're still looking at what's going to come next. Definitely inflation at all-time high at this point. We see the Naira losing value daily. There's so much volatility in the FX market. So the CBN and the MPC have a lot to look out for. But we'll continue the conversation just in a little bit. Do stay with us.
Investing in the capital market can be tricky as the numbers move in different directions. Sometimes the bull bellows. Other times it's the beer that pours. In all of these, an investment decision has to be made. On Capital Market, we help you take the right decision. Join us at 7 p.m. every Saturday, only on Channels Television. Capital Market, investment tips for you.
Foremost among the factors contributing to this positive outlook is the expectation of improved crude oil prices and production, highlighting the crucial role the oil industry is expected to play in driving economic growth. Inflationary pressures are expected to decline in 2024 due to the CBN's inflation targeting policy, which aims to rein in inflation to 21.4%. This will be aided by improved agricultural productivity and the easing of global supply chain pressures. We believe that the Naira is currently undervalued, and coupled with coordinated measures on the fiscal side, we will expedite genuine price discovery in the near term. We are implementing a comprehensive strategy to improve liquidity in our FX markets in the short, medium, and long term. Our focus is on addressing fundamental issues that have hindered the effective operation of our markets over the years.
Yeah, so you heard the central bank governor there saying that the Naira is undervalued at this time. Let's try and bring in Dr. Chamberlain Peterside, Chairman, Excelon Capital Advisors. Let's try it again. Can you hear me, Dr. Chamberlain?
Yes, Ladi. Good morning. Good morning. I can hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. I hear you loud and clear now. So I'm sure you did hear the central bank governor there, talking about the Naira being undervalued. This will definitely be the crux of the conversation at the next MPC meeting. But there are reports the CBN is looking to replace the external members of its Monetary Policy Committee. How are you seeing this? Is it possible to find replacement of those members before the February meeting?
That's quite a bit of a challenge, given the time frame. The meeting is scheduled for sometime around February 26th, thereabout. So I don't think the country lacks talent, and professionals who can fill in that shoes. But it depends on the criteria that is set by central bank, and obviously the time might be quite short to filling 4 members. I wonder why this process hadn't been going on. If it's ongoing before now, then we expect that the candidates might be announced before that meeting. But if it's just starting right now, then I doubt that they're going to find 4 competent, experienced, and independent-minded candidates to fill in that big shoe.
Looking at the composition of the MPC committee, if we go with the other units without that, the external members, what impact, would this have on the decision?
I think that it would be if regulations, then it has to be followed. You needed to constitute the full membership about issues and to get it on. Don't have that's a problem. So I believe that the central bank would or should go ahead to convene the MPC meeting without those 4 independent members being on seat. That's just my personal opinion, but I think that it's good to do it in the proper way. The new CBN governor has started on a good note, so I think it's wise for him to continue to do the right thing. Filling up those 4 independent members before it convenes its next MPC meeting.
So I lost you for a moment before, but are you saying if the meeting goes on without these members, then the decision wouldn't make sense for the economy?
Yeah, I'm saying that because regulation requires that those members must be on seat, then I think it's wise. It makes sense for CBN to fill up those positions, considered very valid, and decisions that has a broad perspective from those independent members as well as the non-independent members. So I don't think it's going to be the right thing to do to convene that meeting. But if it's convened and you take any decisions, then is it going to represent the opinion of private sector independent members? To my thinking, I don't think so.
Let's look at the inflation numbers. Now we're seeing the inflation for December. If you can put up that slide, the last number we had there was a new high. Definitely, we see food inflation definitely over 30% at this time. And, looking at all of this, definitely there's a lot this MPC committee, have to deal with at this point. Headline inflation, 28.92%. That's for December. Core inflation stands at 23%. Food inflation, 33.93%. Huge move there in December. We also see urban and rural inflation. So talk to me now about what you'd like to see, from this for the first meeting in February. Talk to me about more rate hikes or a hold stance, because at the end of the day, we've been having rate hikes since 2023, but inflation is still skyrocketing. What would you like to see at the next meeting?
I think that we are going into a period that I would call, the toughest challenge the CBN is going to have moving forward is fighting inflation. So we would experience over the next couple of meetings, over the next couple of months by the CBN, an increase, a ramping up of the MPR, if you like. And the reason is because we are experiencing a low growth trend in the economy, as well as a high inflationary trend. Therefore, it's a confluence of two factors that is quite complex that creates a deflationary trend. For CBN to address that, it has to first continue to increase rates. By what measure remains to be seen. Maybe 50 basis points, maybe 1 percentage point, gradually ramp up rates so that you can mop up liquidity. On the other side of the spectrum, the federal spend that is mostly targeted at its operating expenditure also is pushing a lot of liquidity into the system, but not in a productive way. So I think there's going to be a blend of approach, both in terms of the NPR moving up and the spending pattern of the federal government, if you like, and the states too, shifting from expenditure-based, OPEX-based expenses to spending on capital expenditures. Because you spend on capital items, capital projects, building up assets and infrastructure, you create jobs, you motivate the private sector investments, you boost GDP. And that way, even if inflation were to be moderated, it would be a situation where you're creating jobs. What we see right now is inflation trending so high, interest rates being so high, and growth rate not being as much as we'd expected. And of course, also have a high job, employment situation. So that creates a very complex stagflationary situation in the economy.
Right, definitely. That's as much you can take. Thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Chamberlain Pittside, Chairman, Excelon Capital Advisors. So sorry the network didn't allow us, enjoy this conversation like we would have liked to. But definitely next time, Dr. Chamberlain, I'll be having you in the studio, so there won't be any interruptions. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Chamberlain is in Port Harcourt. That's why I couldn't join us. Thank you so much. All right, so let's look at definitely January, the month of outlooks for the Nigerian economy. We've had from CIBN, NESG, and most of them, say the economy might grow this way or might not grow that much as expected by, most forecasts that we've seen. But definitely this will form, part of the conversation at the next MPC meeting. The growth projections for the economy, looking at the headwinds such as inflation, currency devaluation. We're seeing Nigerians having to deal with a double whammy of both heavyweights, currency devaluation and inflation at the same time, eating at our pockets at this time. Let's take a look at what the CIBN had to say.
Economic outlooks for the year 2024. The Chartered Institute of Bankers is contributing to the conversation with a tilt to impact on businesses. The experts in related fields are in attendance, but also are the youths. Exposing them to the realities of doing business in Nigeria is the intention.
That this step was necessary.
President of CIBN, Mr. Ken Okpara, joins virtually. He welcomes the panel and other attendees and leaves the floor for discussions. The tone is set by the Director of Monetary Policy at the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Mohammed Tumala, who represented the Deputy Governor, Economic Policy. The forecast from the CBN is optimistic for 2024.
The mining, electricity, gas and water supply subsectors amounted to 58, 52, 51, and 69 index points respectively, indicating, of course, a positive trend.
Then the panel takes over. The outlook is not positive for some of the panelists.
If you have a material increase in cost of lending or cost of credit, what you are going to witness is that these sectors, which I have mentioned that are growing at very slow rate, will not be able to generate the kind of cash flow that will enable them to be able to meet their interest payment obligations and talk less of loan principal repayment. So you're going to have increase in default.
2024 should also be a year to look closely at the gas sector.
Nigeria's potential for gas, value-wise, is greater than what we extract from crude oil. And over decades now, not years, instead of, let me use the word everyone understands, is the capturing the gas, we flare it. And then, of course, we had investment in LNG, as you said. And what we have done so far is expropriate 48% of the capacity, which means we still have unused capacity to start with. Secondly, even what we produce oftentimes, in actual fact, have been budgeted for 25 years.
However, there are strategies for way forward.
People talk about comparative competitiveness. Okay? That's what it should be. Comparative competitiveness. Because comparative advantage is not it anymore.
It's the good and not so good, and the participants have to study both sides for progress.
We are seeing some very good policies, from government. And I think what I will advise is really look at policies that have worked. We have quite a number of policies that have worked and learn from them, okay? And look at policies that have failed and essentially just drop them.
For CIBN, the success of the event is not enough. Following up for implementation is next.
We need just 1 year.
Doesn't look like a large meeting since some of the participants are joining virtually, but that does not belittle the importance of the subject matter. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group is sharing observations on the performance of the economy in 2023, but it is focusing more on how best to navigate policies and implementation for a better 2024 in the stabilization phase with a projection of 3.5% GDP growth.
This phase then talks about achieving growth, not just about growth, but actualizing our natural resources to drive our collective purpose as a nation. And the first part to start with is understanding our natural capital. We are blessed tremendously with our natural capital. If we can achieve this, it will impact our GDP size, it will impact our economic structure, it will impact our employment and our poverty and inequality situations.
Brilliant ideas do not make impact, and the Chief Executive Officer is aware of that.
The cyclic nature of NESG's activities, the Outlook report, at the beginning of the year, then we jump into the reform execution and monitoring with government, then we show up in October at the summit to signal where the country is, what we won on, what we lost on. Then we jump back into, again, reform action and execution. That cyclic process, whilst it looks mundane, is part of how you build national conversations that change a country over a generation or more.
And so, for the use of the government and private sector and economists,
these and more are some of the content in the NESG 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook, which also has the Economic Transformation Group.
Thank you, sir. How many persons?
All right, that was the macroeconomic outlook from the NESG. Definitely, it's all about outlooks in January, and we've heard from experts like and heavyweights like Mr. Bismarck Rouhani. They've talked about heavy lifting in the first half of 2024 before we start getting some kind of soft landing sometime. But let's look at the markets now. Let's see how it fared last week. We see the all-share index, 102,000 points, over 100K. Big move we've seen in January alone, about over 30% rise for this market. 8.32%, that was the close for the week last week. Equity cap there sitting at 56 trillion naira at this point. And the question on most people's minds at this point is, When is the pullback coming? When will this market slow down? We're seeing some quarters actually afraid at this point, thinking, is it time to take profit or do I still stay in this market? Let's take a look at the trading activity for last week. It was subdued compared to the week before that. We're seeing volume lower, 2.98 billion. That's what was traded in the market. For the value there, it was worth 57 billion naira. But still less than the previous week. Deals, 67,962 points. Let's look at the sectoral performance for last week. Now we see banking, again, down 2.36%. We're still seeing profit taking on most of the tier 1 banks and tier 2 banks in that counter. Consumer goods, big 5.29%, but we see the industrial goods, they were the heavyweight of last week, 23.20% to close the week. Oil and gas, 11.57%. Oil and gas no longer unchanged at this time. We're seeing big moves coming from the oil and gas counter. The top trades, Transnational Corp PLC, United Bank for Africa PLC, and Sterling Financial Holdings were the top trades for last week. But trading is on. Definitely right now, and we're going to be getting intraday analysis on Business Incorporated. We're going to know if the market is going to stay above 100,000 for this week. Let's get a brief outlook now for the markets. We see the DMO carrying out an FGM bond auction for 2024, 360 billion naira bond on offer across 3 reopenings today. And for the bond market, analysts at Codros expect the outcome of this month's FGN bond auction holding. That's today. That will influence sentiment in the secondary market. So definitely, we'll get more details on Business Incorporated. I'll hand things over now to the Sunrise team.
Okay. Sunrise, yes, indeed, continuing our conversation, but this time we're switching to politics and how it's playing out in Edo State ahead of the governorship elections. As you've seen in that welcoming slide, we've got Asue Gudalo here with us. He is a governorship aspirant for the PDP in Edo State. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Good morning, Yota. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Been a while.
Yeah. It's like we're competing our voices. Which one's deeper? Yours or mine?
You are here. I'm not here. So that means yours must be better and deeper, at least you. I guess if I was qualified, I'll be sitting where you're sitting. You know? Yeah, but thanks for the compliment. Yeah.
How's your campaign going on now?
I think it's going good. It's hard work, focused work, a lot of sleepless nights and things, but it's going good. You know, we thank God. You know, we have a good team working with us, good team of girls and guys. So I think we're working hard. We're working very hard. We're trying to reach out to the people of Edo State with our message, and I think it's going good, by God's grace. Each day we get better, and each day we're able to pass on our message to the people. Yeah.
So has it been what or how you expected the build-up to be? I mean, coming into this position, vying for that ticket. It's one thing being around, but now being in the saddle, seeking for that ticket. In terms of how people have responded and reacted to your candidature, your aspirant, has that been any surprise for you?
Yes, because I've been really overwhelmed. I've been truly overwhelmed by the response of people, people from every side of the divide, even people that people claim are on the other side. You know, when I've reached out to people, when I've talked to them, when I've tried to pass my message on to them, I've received very great responses from the people, from the leaders in the party. I'm really surprised by the reception and the welcome. So I am happy about that. Like I said earlier, it's a lot of hard work, focused work. You need to move from place to place, people to people, selling yourself, selling your message, telling people what you have for the state, staying focused on the people and the state and how you can improve the state. But I'm really, really overwhelmed, and I'm
humbled by my reception. People have been good to me. People have been very good to me.
Coming from your background, before delving into politics, I assume that you must have counted the costs and then done your analysis or whatever it was going to take you. So could you talk to us about what kind of, risk analysis did you do before delving into politics, the murky waters of politics, as they call it?
Obviously, you know I didn't do any risk analysis. Because if I did any risk analysis, I wouldn't be where I am today, it's I won't call it murky waters. It's just areas we don't fully understand. And it's a different area, different dimension, sometimes different thinking. So I won't call it murky waters, but it's a difficult way, and you really have to get to understand it. For instance, when I got into politics, I needed to do a lot of self-selling because I've been in other spheres. I've been in the corporate sphere, the legal sphere, where I'm well known. But as a politician, and in the nooks and crannies of Edo State, I wasn't as well known as I am in the corporate world. So I needed to sell myself to my people, introduce myself, tell my people what I'm capable of doing, who I am, and what I can provide, what I want to provide, my desire to move us into the first world, to move our people out of poverty into prosperity. So yeah, if I looked at the cost, from a risk dimension, I probably would have been so overwhelmed that I would have stayed back at home, But I decided, because I feel this is the hand of God in my life, So I didn't stop to count the cost. If I was going into an investment or something else, yes, of course, I'll do the risk analysis. But this is different,
Are you implying that there's no risk in this?
There is.
Venture?
I'm saying that if I stopped to analyze the risk, I wouldn't have got out of bed. That's what I'm saying. There's high risk. There's risk from very many dimensions. Yeah.
Okay. But then there are those who will wonder, for one who has been taking stock of risk and then looking at ways to move around risk or to manage the risk as they do. Some would wonder, why didn't you stop to assess the possible risks that you're likely to come in contact with in stepping into this venture?
No. I had a broad sweep of what the risk would be. The downside, the worst case would be that it wouldn't work and I'll go back home. Really, that's the worst case. But once I put my hand on a plow, I give it my very best. And I do everything legal, effective, and efficient to make it work. And I knew that if I did my very best, by God's grace and by the support of the good people of Edo State, I should succeed. I should, and I would continue putting my hands on the plow, working very hard, passing my message to the good people of Edo State. But there's a risk. There's a downside risk. I'm giving up my life as I know it. And that's a major risk. I've been in a comfort zone. I've worked hard as a lawyer. I've worked very hard in the corporate world. Even in my NGOs, I've worked very hard. So I've known a way of life. But also, as I went through this way of life, I also knew that I had to look at life and giving back and working for my people from a different perspective. And that perspective, like I'd said before, was really, you impact lives in chunks of 5,000, 2,000, 10,000 people maximum. You should think of impacting life on a much broader scope.
Now you're thinking, if I use the word global. Edo global.
I said Edo global. Oh, yeah, because Edo is going global. Yes, global.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but you see, Edo State's been in the news for different reasons. Good, bad, and all of that. Some of them very exciting. Historically, Edo State is one of the most historic states in, to be precise. So, coming in there, what are you going to bring yet? Before what are you going to bring? Yet Edo State has been hard done by. So what is it that's going to make you different from all those that have come in with all the high hopes and dashing them midway?
No, it's not. Sometimes it's not Edo State that's been hard done by. Nigeria hasn't realized its full potential. And being a part of Nigeria, it has reflected in Edo State.
I spoke Edo State.
Yeah, so I'm coming.
When we're the Benin Empire, the history and all of that. The strength of the Benin Empire was one that was next to Mali Empire, which is one of the strongest kingdoms on the African continent. So if that be...
Yes, for instance, Benin, we had street lights in the 16th century in Benin. You know, we were an advanced people, an advanced culture. But you then know the history of Africa, the impacts of the slave trade and all of that, and in bringing back and unwinding and unrolling development and advancement, you know. But I don't want to go into that because that's something we should have let go over the centuries and over the years. We've had the capability, the resources, the people, the enterprise to have been able to move ourselves into the real world, into the first world. And that's the story I'm selling. I'm looking at my people in Edo State and I'm saying, we can move into the first world with the resources we have, with the capacities we have, with the natural and human capacities we have, and with the terrain we have, the landscape we have. So that's my story. And I'm saying, let us come together as one unified people of Edo State, looking into the future and working hard to do the things that will move us out of poverty into prosperity. There's in Edo State, you know, and in Nigeria indeed, but in Edo State, which is where I'm focused, there's no reason why a mother is going to hospital to have a child, and we're all very worried about her chances of coming out. There's no reason why we have no water in many areas, where we have no light, where we have bad roads, where I can't cross the road to go and say hello to Chamberlain, because I'm afraid that in crossing the road, somebody's going to kidnap me, and that's the last of me. You know, there's just things that aren't working. You know, they say it's a microcosm of the whole country, but let's focus on us, and let's do the best for us. So if we move Edo State, and my feeling is that if we have a number of states across the country that are taking this position and are working hard to move their economy into the first world inclusively, looking at the soft and hard social issues, if we have many more states or a few more states doing this, we will grow Nigeria bottom up. You know, so we won't worry too much about what's happening here in Abuja, or we won't worry as much, you know, and people's focus would go to the state level, because truly it's the states that should drive development. And that's what we seek to do in Edo State.
Is it the states or the local government?
No,
because the states that seem to have subsumed the local government that are supposed to be the driving force.
Yes, the local governments have a responsibility constitutionally, and we will let the local governments do their work and carry out their constitutional duties. What's important, that's truly the grassroots intervention. But the state must set the example and set the pace, set the philosophy, set the policies, set the guidelines. And for me, leadership by example is what is critical. You know, you must have transparent leadership, and if you do as you say, you always do as you say, everybody watches what they call the body language. But you do as you say. You set the right example. You must say transparency, hard work, focus, you know, love of your people. That's fundamental. Okay. If you love your people, you will always wish your people well and do well by them.
So some of the immediate things you need to address, I mean, before you eventually merge. So how successful are you successfully shrugging off that impression or narration that you are handpicked or solely backed by the governor?
Yeah, it comes up every time when people want to talk, but I've known the governor for a long time. I knew him in university. He's my good friend. As an investment banker, we worked on opposite or the same size of transactions, you know. So that's it. You know, the people of Edo State are a unique kind of people. And if you look historically in politics, not just Nigeria, you know, this story of somebody backing somebody putting anybody in office, it hasn't worked. You know, look at it historically. All those so-called godfatherisms don't seem to have worked. And the only true godfather is God Almighty and the people of Edo State. Those are my two godfathers, you know, so that's it, you know.
No, but you will need support from wherever it comes, as long as you get to where you're going. So wherever the support comes, anybody will grab it. So if support comes from there, wouldn't you take it?
Yeah, if it came, I'll take it, but that's not where my support is coming from. My support is, you know, I started this, family and friends. That's how I started this process. And then associates in Edo State. That's how I started this process. Now, the good people of Edo State are taking over my message and taking me over. And so I'm being propelled by the good people of Edo State and by the grace of God. So that's how we're working.
So do you consider it a weakness for people to think that you are backed solely, or at least largely, by the governor? That impression, for instance.
It depends. You know, the way the people have parlayed it is as if it is a bad thing, you know. So it's not a weakness if it was true, you know, and I would have welcomed it, you know, if it was true, because it should make life easier for you, you know. So I don't see it as a weakness. The way people have looked at it as if, you know, it's a bad thing. So if it was provided, that would be great, you know. But I don't see it as a weakness in that way, except people are looking at a downside to it. But I think the more important thing is to focus on our message. That's the more important thing. And the governor, I've heard him say a number of times that he's creating a level playing field. He has no candidate. And I believe him. Because if you looked at the space, I see he has 4 or 5 friends in that space. So I wonder why, when people say what they say, they think I'm his particular friend. I don't think I'm his closest friend or his favorite friend among the people in the space. So what I've just done is just not get distracted. Because for me, I see all of that as...
Do you disregard that with a wave of hand?
I disregard it. I disregard it generally because it's a distraction. I see it as a distraction. I see it as people who want to move the narrative away from the focus on the people and the issues that affect the state.
So you don't think that you need to look at it from the perspective of, say, probably, if this is the way people are thinking, I need to analyze it and see how it's going to affect me negatively or positively?
I've looked at it. Obviously, there are those who think that if it's true, it gives you an undue advantage. So there's a negative and there's a positive. And I've looked at it. But for me, because I see it as a distraction, and because I see people want to twist it into a negative advantage, a negative disadvantage, you know, I moved away from there. Because for me, it's a total distraction. You know, everywhere I go, this thing comes up, and I don't want to spend my time talking about it. I want to spend my time talking about what the issues are for the good people of Edo State. One of the things I noticed as I got more involved in this is that we need to kind of get our party working well as one united entity. So that's been my focus. And I've been going around the state talking to people, both the people and then the leaders and those who seem to have slight misalignments and trying to get everybody to come back together, you know.
Incidentally, that's how politics works. That's how people think. That's how people vote. So all of those things, you see them and you're like, wow, these are the things you have to deal with. It turns out.
And for me, it's my experience as also, you know, my experience in negotiating and talking to people and trying to get people to understand what the real issues are and then reaching a transaction, a deal, and succeeding has helped me a lot in this. So I'm talking to people, and I think...
So the professional experience also helps.
Yes, it has helped me a lot in this. And I think also, I've been blessed, you know, because people have received me very positively. Even people that at the beginning appeared to be totally antagonistic, once we start speaking and I tell them, you know, what I'm thinking, my own ideas, my own alignments, so, you know, I've received positivity.
When you speak, say, you want to pull everybody together within the party. So how well are you doing? For instance, do you have the support of the legacy group?
Yes. So the way I'd like to put that is this, is that there are people that are trying to create schisms that are not as wide as people try and create. You know, in every grouping, in every organization, there'll be different views. There'll be people that think differently about certain issues, maybe philosophical, it may be otherwise, you know. So there are different thinkings within the party. And the way I see it, a chunk of it is philosophical and people's approach to how things should be done. And different people will have different approaches. So people label some people legacy, new PDP. The way I see it is that I see people with different ideas about how to get to a common goal. And the common goal is how do we deliver for the people of the state, you know? So what I'm trying to do is to kind of bridge that gap and say, guys, you know, we're all focused and we all want the best for the people of Edo State. So let's think the same way about this. So let's go on the same pathway about this.
Is that to say that you don't consider addressing any such group as legacy group?
What do you mean by legacy when you say legacy? You mean people that have been there?
No,
or not? When you say legacy, what does it mean? What's your own understanding of it? Because I tried to explain to you what it is, that people have different ways of thinking about delivering for the people of Edo State.
Yeah.
And because we have different ways of thinking, can we just aggregate and come close together the way we're thinking?
There's a group of people within the party that refer to themselves as a legacy group. Do you recognize that?
That's what I've just explained to you, Chamberlain, that it's a way of, a narrative, a way of thinking, a different way of thinking within the party. The focus of the party and the party leader and the party leadership is to create a better life for the people of Edo State. Okay, so there's a difference in thinking of how we will get to that objective. That's all it is.
Do you have the support of Chief Danobi?
Chidanobi and I have spoken. We're great friends. He's not supporting me as we speak, you know, but we're great. At least we're developing. No, because I think at the end of the day, both of us will reach an alignment. We both should have an objective, which should be what is in the best interest of our party and what is the best interest of the people of Edo State. Fundamental, you know. So once we aggregate to that, then the differential will be minimal. And that's what I am struggling and working hard to make sure we achieve. Let's all aggregate what's in the best interest of the people of Edo State. Clear. Then what's in the best interest of the PDP. Clear. Once those two things are clear, then we'll all get to the same place. That, for me, that's really the issue, you know. Once those two things are clear, we'll get to the same place. We must think always in the best interest of the people of Edo State, which is my number one issue and number one point and my number one focus. Then, what's in the best interest of our party? It's good that our party works hard to retain government in Edo State so that we can continue providing good services and good opportunities and for the people of Edo State.
Ayo.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Let me begin, sir, by highlighting the fact that your initials are AI, which also stands for artificial intelligence. Well, we'll come to whether or not technology is going to play a role. But you've been speaking quite a few about, you know, the politicians and political groupings in the state. I'm wondering if you think there is a necessity for what you would call political elite, or rather elite consensus in the state. There are so many people in the space, and so many of them professionals, no doubt. But this seat is going to be just for one person at the end of the day. Quite a number of political parties, quite a number of contestants or pretenders, as they say in politics now, in all of the political parties. Do you see a need for some kind of elite consensus, especially in the light of these groupings? Is it this senatorial group that should, senatorial area that should produce, or that senatorial district? Do you see a need for all the politicians, all the professionals in this space to come together and say, guys, let's have an alliance of sorts, a consensus of sorts that will make this easy for everyone, all in the interest of Edo State, as you keep saying?
Thank you very much, Ayo. I think what's key is what do you intend to do for the people of Edo State? What do you intend to provide? I don't think it's an issue of an elite consensus or any sort of consensus. It's an issue of looking at what each person brings to the table and what each person seeks to provide for the people of Edo State to improve the quality of life, to drag people out of poverty, to increase our infrastructure content and infrastructure quotient. That's what's important. What are we doing to make life better for our people? Education, health, livable minimum wage, livable accommodation. You know, those are the important things. Each person, man and woman, having quality jobs, being happy with themselves. You know, that's what's important. So it's not an elite consensus issue. It's an issue of what do we have to provide for the people of Edo State? What's our story for uplifting Edo State from the third world to the first world? You know, for me, that's what it is. And you know, when you're talking about consensus, if the consensus aggregates in that direction, then so be it. But that's the only thing that makes sense at this point in time. What is in the best interest of our people in Edo State?
Well, you know, anyone listening to you now, Mr. Ighodalo, and I say this with respect, would say this is the same thing I've been hearing since 1999. promises. What do I have in mind for my people and all of that? Every politician has said exactly the same thing. And the people, every successive government says exactly the same thing. And then so it makes it sound like the previous guy who made the same promise didn't do anything. So on the one hand is the issue of the fact that you're a professional coming into politics. And on the other hand is the fact that these are the promises that have been made to people over time. Trust has, by so doing, been eroded over the years. And you know that trust is at the heart of business, as it is at the heart of performance. So what's the plan to build that trust in a unique way as it has profited you in business?
Thank you. Let me say something. And when people say that in narrative, people suggest other people haven't done well or haven't helped in laying a foundation, that's not correct. We've had many great leaders in Nigeria from the 50s till today, and each person incrementally has done good things. It's just that the aggregation of the good things haven't been enough to take us out of where we are. But we've had many great leaders who have done good things. So when people seem to suggest that there are people saying there hasn't been good work done before, it's really untrue, really untrue. I don't want to go into the business of talking about good leaders and things and naming people that have been good leaders, but we all know historically. So please take that away. And I will never join that discussion or that narrative, because I always salute those who have gone ahead and have done fantastic things. Yes, I agree with you that people have been saying the same things. When people come on the campaign trail, they say these same things. But one of the things I tell people, and I say this, and I kind of use the expression and the adage, and I say, if you want to employ somebody to work for you in this studio, you'll take them through some kind of test. You'll check their credentials. You'll see what they've done before, what they've achieved before, and then you'll see whether they're fit for purpose. Sometimes, some of the things we haven't done well is check whether the people we want to put into governance are fit for purpose. What did they do before? How have they worked before? What was their trust quotient at their trust level? What did they achieve? And how have they achieved what they achieved? So I think those are the important questions that we should ask ourselves before we then start looking at what they're telling us they want to do. Talk is cheap, but, being able to walk your talk is the difficult part. And the only way people can know what you can do in future is to assess what you've done before. So that's what I am putting on the table. And like you've rightly said, at each political cycle, each political time, people come and say the same things. But you've seen some who have said those things and have kind of implemented and achieved. And you've seen many others who have said and haven't achieved. Now compare where they were both coming from. If you look at those and the antecedents of those who talked and walked their talk, and those who talked and didn't walk their talk, you will see that maybe what we should do a lot more of is when we want to give people the opportunity to serve us, let's interrogate what it is they've done before, where are they coming from, what have they achieved, who are they?
I've seen people change when they get into positions in politics.
Very true.
Will that happen to you?
No. Because, one of the things that I've looked at this, and part of why we've had problems with leadership is that thing you call change. People get into office and get carried away by very many things, and for different reasons, I don't want to go into the reasons, But if you stay true to yourself, and you put your feet on the ground, and I tell people, it's the people, not just the people around you, the people of the state, the people of the country. We should not deify leadership. It's just one from amongst us whom we have given the opportunity to try and lead for the time being. So we don't deify leadership. We put their feet to the fire. If people have made promises, please take them up on their promises. I was saying something about people saying the same thing and not achieving. It's largely our fault as the people. If people have told you they will do something, either they set milestones or timelines, which is the kind of life I understand, setting milestones and timelines for achievement. If people have promised you and then they don't do it, you should be able to come back to those people and say, you promised to do ABC and you haven't achieved. And you keep on going on and on until you get the opportunity to either remove them or keep them if they're doing well, you know. So for me, it's clear, you know, you must keep your feet by the fire. You must stay grounded. I'm hoping that those who surround me will keep me grounded if I'm elected into office by the grace of God. And you keep praying. You must hold fast to God, you know. God directs us.
Well, as a strategist, I know you know hope is not a strategy.
Yeah, I know.
You're going to do things to make sure that happens.
But you know, one of the things you can do, you stay within your cycle. You stay the same circle of guys and cycle of guys that have, or guys and girls, you know, before I get into trouble with my daughter, guys and girls, you know, who have kept you sane. You stay within.
Well, they say 24 hours in politics is a very long time.
Extremely so.
We still have several steps before the D-Day itself, but today is a significant day, so we wish you all the best while you go at it. Thank you very much for coming on today as well.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome anytime. Governorship aspirant for Edo State's PDP, that's for the governorship elections. So that is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Uso. Goodbye.
I'm Neo Taigbe. Bye-bye.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a productive week.